This is a parody of the Star Wars theme song. It is copyright free because I'm using my mouth. I cannot pay for the Star Wars theme song, so I am using the best I can. This is from memory, copyright free, parody. There's some strings here, and then some other stuff happens here, and then John Williams does his thing. The sun wins over here, maybe a little bit. I'm starting to sound like Strong Bad on accident. Star Wars theme song, you know what it is. It's so famous, so I can't pay for it. So I'm using my mouth, Imagine yourself living in a society that has fallen apart. Close your eyes and really try to picture it. Shouldn't be too hard. The place you call home, once rich and powerful, a supposed bastion of freedom and plurality, with institutions dedicated to the advancement of science and technology, falls to fascists who find cracks in the foundation and exploit them to whisk themselves into power. Half of the people in this nation you're imagining are in shock and are terrified, but the other half, they cheer. What's a little less freedom, after all, if it keeps us safe from the other? There are still elections and votings and pickets, but you can just feel it in the air. It's all for show. It goes nowhere. The old world's power has eroded too far. It's too late. The fascists have taken over. Fear not, though. There's still hope. A new hope, if you will. Little pockets of resistance. Ordinary people are defying orders, committing sabotage, fighting back, helping those most vulnerable. The more they fight back, the harder the state clamps down. But the more they are oppressed, the more the people start fighting back. It's a feedback loop, a spiral, or an arms race. Yes, momentum is building. You can feel that in the air too. That the fascist days, they're numbered. The momentum builds and builds, and more people start fighting back. They give speeches about a new world without oppression, without inequalities. That sounds like something worth fighting for. People are dying for it. And just as the wave is about to crest and crush the fascists once and for all, some people from before the fascist takeover join up and take charge. They want to get things organized properly. They want change, of course, but not too much. These people want to go back to the systems whose contradictions led to the oppression you're currently fighting against. Remember how good things used to be? We could go back and learn from our mistakes. These people, known as liberals, will say, this time it'll be different, baby. But it never is. The second and final season of Andor just finished airing at time of writing, and for me and a lot of other folks, it might just be the best thing to come from Star Wars in its entire existence. Over 2 seasons and a movie, we explore in detail the life, radicalization, deeds, sacrifices, and ultimately, spoilers, death of a man named Cassian Andor, rebel leader. We watch in horror as tragedy befalls him and his loved ones as they struggle to bring disparate resistance fighters together into a full rebellion. It's an unflinching look at the dirty work that is done on the ground to set the stage for mythic figures we already know about to swoop in and win the day. We see just what we will have to risk and lose in a fight against fascism and for a better world. It was really fucking good is what I'm saying. Aside from every aspect of the show, from set design to writing to acting, firing on all cylinders, this show draws on a lot of real-world examples of successful revolutions in history that can teach the budding revolutionary a lot about what it takes to shape things and drag them, often kicking and screaming, towards a more egalitarian society. These sacrifices often are not a choice between saving yourself or giving something up for the greater good, but instead a choice between a sacrifice for the rebellion or a sacrifice of your freedom to stay safe. A choice between others and consent to power. We can see this in Cassian's story. From his childhood on, he has been at the whim of systems that see him as just a nuisance. This starts with the Old Republic, not the Empire, strip mining his planet and taking him away from his family. It is made very clear early on in Season 1 that Andor has no interest in fighting the Empire. He, like a lot of folks, just want to get his and escape. But with a system like capitalism and its inevitable final form, fascism, it is so all-encompassing that there is no escape. You either fight or become consumed. Cassian eventually chooses to fight, unlike others in the show who we will touch on later. Before Cassian meets Luthen, he only fights for and by himself. And while he is able to pull off small victories, this is nothing but an annoyance to the Empire. At most, his schemes are a line item in a report on Coruscant. This a revolution does not make. In the recent killing of United Health CEO by an unknown assassin, we can see the effectiveness of this lone wolf tactic. While I think propaganda the deed, as it's called occasionally, is not without its merits, without some organizing force behind it, it amounts to nothing. It's a headline for a week and then people move on. At worst, it gives the state an excuse. It's like candy. It feels good, but has no substance, and eventually, it'll hurt you. Take my teeth as an example. That said, when it comes to these acts, it does highlight just how much potential for revolution is out there. Again, look at the killer known as the claims adjuster, or more accurately, the reaction to this deed of propaganda. The internet flooded with love and memes for this unknown man. Then, once a snitch tipped the feds to the current suspect, Luigi Mangione, his legal GoFundMe overflowed, letters flooded in, and fan cams were made. Aside from being very funny, this just shows how much potential for revolution is out there. The appetite for change, and in this case blood, is palpable. If this killer had been attached to a group or an organization or even an ideology, it may have ended up as more of a threat to the status quo instead of just a standalone incident. A lot of young anarchists I know come up against this problem. There is no brick I can throw or CEO I can murk that will end capitalism outright. Systematic problems will take collective solutions.
I will slay the beast. Ha! Ha ha! The foe is vanquished. Spoke too soon, I see. No matter. Ha ha! There, that takes care of that. Oh. I'm sensing a pattern here, so I'll just do this. Take that! Shit, I guess I should have brought backup.
Cassian eventually learns this and starts to realize the stronger the collective, the better chance he has at being free. In order to get out from under the empirical boot, Andor needs someone like Luthen to take him into the fold of rebel cells and sympathizers. What this show does really well is highlight just how many different types of fighting there can be. Revolution is not all building bombs, assassinations, and covert ops. It takes a vast network of supporters who can pass as upright citizens to do the legwork. These unsung heroes gather intel, provide material assistance like food and money, and when the heat is on, hide and help those on the front line. They also keep you grounded and remind you exactly what it is you're fighting for, aside from revenge, as we see on planets like Gorman or Mina Rao. All the rebel cells that are without this kind of support fall into infighting and disillusionment. Saw Gerrera may have valid criticisms of what becomes the rebellion, but without the support of the people he has been fighting for, his cell collapses into suspicion and bad jacketing, as it's known. The Gorman may have been infiltrated, but as we saw in their meetings, that massacre was happening no matter what. So at least they went down swinging. Saw and his partisans are one of the most relatable factions in this show to me personally. There's a conversation between him and Luthen in Season 1 that I have had dozens of times, in which Saw is outraged at the idea of working with other groups he sees as less politically pure than him and his band. Replace the separatist and neo-republicans with MLMs and tankies, and you have a glimpse into some of the most frustrating conversations I've had in my life. To be clear, Saw is right. They have ultimately conflicting views of society than other cells. But in this fight we are having, it is a war on all fronts. It will not be over in one battle, and no change will happen if everybody loses. It's called a struggle for a reason. Often, as an anarchist like myself, you are choosing your allies based on who will bring about favorable conditions to organize under, with the understanding that, if all goes well, you'll still have a lot of work to do. An anarchistic society is the utopia we are aiming for, and it's unfortunately a long way off. I personally have a pet theory that I think everyone is an anarchist. They just don't know it yet. What they lack is education and the detoxification of the capitalist propaganda they were literally born submerged in. But it is much harder to give them that education when everyone is constantly struggling to feed themselves or under threat from secret police. Our mission is to fight for what we can while we can, with the knowledge that someone after us will pick up the baton long after we're gone. Another lesson for the would-be rebel this show has to offer is that over the course of fighting, there will be a cost, and you will lose people. Sacrifices will have to be made for the greater good, and no character understood that more than Luthen. Those in power will never give up that power willingly, which is why systems are so rarely, if ever, changed from the inside. Using a lot of air quotes. It will always protect itself above all else, by force if it sees fit. Andor lost everyone close to him in the end, from his sister to his adopted mother to Bix and a future with a child he never knew about. But importantly, as Cassian suffers these losses, he comes to see Luthen's point of view. They may not win. They may never see the better world they so desperately crave. But if there is even a chance, they must fight so someone in the future doesn't have to. And if that means sacrifice, so be it. Just make it worth it. As these scattered pockets of resistance start to come together and get organized, is where the trouble starts to seep in. With any sort of structure of resistance based on hierarchy comes concentrated power, and with that power comes those that will abuse and misuse it. Which brings us to the end of Andor Season 2 and Rogue One, and about around to my point. It's time to talk about space liberals. The Star Wars universe is full of tragic stories like Cassian Andor. From the galaxy itself falling under the reign of a Sith empire, to the disposable lives of the clone army that mirrors how we treat our veterans today, to the more personal stories of Anakin Skywalker being manipulated into a fall from grace as the chosen one, down to a simple fascist enforcer. And that's just the prequels. But above all else, there is one tragic life that I think is at the heart of all conflict in the Star Wars universe, that also mirrors our own problems back here in our galaxy. And that is the life of one Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi was a Jedi Knight who dedicated his life to the service of the Jedi Order and the protection of the Old Republic. He spent the prime of his life fighting in a war to preserve the Old Republic from the threat of separatists and the return of the Sith, only to watch it fall into a dictatorship with a Sith Lord as a ruler. He placed his trust in a Jedi Council of Elders, not because he thought they always made the right choice, but because the system he was in gave those elders power, and he must respect the office and tradition, even shunning the potential love of his life and watching her die in his arms for the cause. All of it only to watch that system of power fail his brother in arms and fall to its own hubris. Even then, he spends his golden years in hiding, protecting the person he thought would bring back the glory of a more civilized time. Until his dying day, and even after as a Force ghost, he trusted time and again that the rules-based order and decorum it required would win the day and bring back life how it was. Until his dying day, and even after as a Force ghost, he trusted time and again that the rules-based order and the decorum it required would win the day and bring life back to how it was. Sound like any particular political parties you know? The Skywalker Saga films are ostensibly about the Skywalker family and the fallout of their rise and fall. From the fall of Anakin to the rise and fall and rise again of Luke, there are a lot of heartbreaking characters in Star Wars. But this refusal to accept that the galaxy has changed and the avoidance of any attempt to change things, and instead trusting the status quo will always be, for me makes Obi-Wan Kenobi one of the most tragic characters in all of Star Wars. He is what we know on this planet as a liberal. Someone who looks to protect the status quo with the insidious use of civility and middle managers. Someone who believes all change should be incremental and done through proper channels and means. He is someone who wants to manage the revolution. In these dark times, as we look more and more like that galaxy far, far away, and we fall deeper and deeper into fascism, his life can be a cautionary tale of how not to fight back. When fascism eventually does come knocking, liberals like Obi-Wan have enough blind faith in the bureaucracy they are so steeped in, they rather smugly think they cannot be defeated in the marketplace of ideas. Their system is too complex to be upended. The ship is too large and complicated to do any real damage. But as with any system, no matter how complex and how guarded the levers of power, it is vulnerable to manipulation. All it takes, in the Star Wars universe and ours, is one emergency and freedoms will be freely handed over in the name of safety. Both Palpatine and Trump were voted in. The violence happens afterwards, before anyone within the system realizes what is going on. The storming of the Capitol on January 6th didn't give Trump his second term. The Dems' lack of an alternative vision did. To bring this back to Andor, let's take a look at one of the standout characters, Mon Mothma. Mon is a senator and future chancellor who grew up on the wealthy planet of Chandrila. Despite all evidence to the contrary, she believes her ideals and speeches will win out. She is the living embodiment of, when they go low, we go high. And much like Obi-Wan learned, the high ground may give you a temporary moral victory, but it paves the way for a far worse monster to take your enemy's place. For people like Obi-Wan, Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma, they remember how things were and want to bring them back, but conveniently forget that it is precisely because of how things were before that allowed things to become how they are now. For Obi-Wan and Mon, politics is life on Coruscant, with meetings, debates, Robert's rules, and voting. It's the will of the Force, or prophecy. But for Cassian and the rest of us, politics is the difference between oppression, starvation, destitution, and freedom. So we know we must be willing to fight by any means to save ourselves.
Our rent is too high. Groceries are too expensive. Healthcare is unaffordable. It feels like we have no future. What are you going to do about it?
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context.
What the fuck was that? Okay, what about Israel? What are you going to do to stop the genocide?
For us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present.
Why won't you do something?
Mon Mothma keeps herself shielded from the dirty work of revolution, instead using her family wealth to essentially buy her way in. Several times throughout the show, she is seen to be willfully ignorant and unwilling to make those sacrifices for the cause, as we discussed before. The biggest sacrifices she seems to be willing to make are having an audience with goons or going to parties with people she finds beneath her. But whether you're willing or not, the bill does come due. For Mon, that mostly means giving up her privileged lifestyle. The few times the violence of the revolution seeps into her life, she is disgusted by it. So when she eventually becomes the de facto head of the resistance, she works to undermine it almost as soon as she can. Fast forward to after the defeat of the Empire, with their forces scattered to the wind and the Emperor dead. Mon Mothma becomes the leader of the New Republic, and Obi-Wan trains a young Jedi Luke Skywalker as he did his father before him, from beyond the grave. Chancellor Mothma immediately goes out and begins to handicap the more radical militant rebel alliance that won the war in order to recreate the power structures that started the whole mess. She demilitarizes the Republic and tries to rehabilitate former Imperials in the Star Wars version of Operation Paperclip. Because of this, in the short space between trilogies, the New Republic is unprepared for yet another fall into the resurgence of fascism under the guise of the First Order. Meanwhile, the New Jedi Order has barely begun before it too falls under the direction of Luke and Obi-Wan's teachings. There is a reason that Obi-Wan is not the one to appear to Luke in exile in The Last Jedi, and instead Yoda is the one to tell him to learn from the mistakes of the past and burn the ancient text. Despite the Jedi teachings that Obi-Wan is so fond of, being against attachment of any kind, he would never be able to tell Luke to let go of the old order. Both of these characters are clear examples of how liberal elitism, the sense that they know best how to run the galaxy, and that the average being in the galaxy needs to be guided, either by the Force or just Force, will always fall to its own hubris. They are not interested in freedom for all, just power for themselves. If you listen to people on the right, a liberal is anyone left of, well, them. If you think queer folks deserve any sort of respect and dignity, liberal. Think there should be an easier time getting into this country? Liberal. Think there shouldn't be borders at all? Liberal. It's all the same to them. From Barack Obama to Bernie Sanders, from Hillary Clinton to Howard Zinn, from AOC and Nancy Pelosi and Mark Cuban to Murray Bookchin, Noam Chomsky, and David Graeber. It's all liberal to the rabid fascist. In a lot of ways, I envy this simple view of the world. It must be nice to know so clearly who your enemy is. Everyone. If left alone, they will eat themselves, as we see by the end of Andor, but we'll get that in the next section. The frustrating thing, or at least one of the frustrating things, about being a leftist is knowing that liberal, conservative, fascist doesn't matter. They all serve the same master in their own unique ways in the end. Capital.
I just want health care!
And talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Why are you like this? Oh, I see. That's it. I'm burning this whole thing down.
Any and all systems need maintenance. Most everything in life takes maintenance, but capitalism especially, due to its inherent contradictions, needs constant upkeep and coercion, and even then it inevitably collapses into crisis. Liberals look to manage this downward spiral with slight reforms and empty platitudes, while fascists look to accelerate and exploit it, but both have a vested interest in capitalism continuing. That is actually the way to tell a liberal from a leftist or a rebel. The rebel seeks to change everything in society and decentralize power. This makes liberals uncomfortable because they want that power, but still believe that they are the good guys. In the end, when finally it becomes impossible not to pick a side, liberals will always run to the right, betray their promises, and become what they once claimed to fight against. Scratch a liberal, a fascist bleeds, as they say. Fascists will always see everyone else as an enemy, no matter how much you pander to them. Several supposedly opposition parties across the globe, from the Democrats here in the US to the Labour Party in the UK, see an electoral threat to their power from the right, and instead of offering voters an alternative vision for the world, pander to those to the right of them, hoping to appease them. It never works, no matter what red meat you throw their way. Just ask Neville Chamberlain. Fascists will always see everyone as an enemy because fascism needs an enemy to exist. Without someone to blame for society's failures, they have no solutions. While liberal politicians may be unsalvageable as allies in our fight, that's not to say that their liberal base isn't. Yes, there are plenty of blue no matter who woke skulls out there that are to be avoided and shunned, but there are many more people who are liberal simply by default. They were born, just like you and me, into this hellish neoliberal society, but for whatever reason, have never stopped to think about how things are run and if they need to change. That's our job. We must educate and radicalize them. As I've said in previous videos, to have a mass movement, you're gonna need the masses. Willman, Brasa, Marva, and even Cassian all start as people uninterested in political struggle. But they all had empathy for others that can't survive under a boot. Vel is Mon Mothma's cousin, and theoretically would have grown up in similar circumstances. Yet she, maybe because of some inner convictions, or maybe because in their seemingly patriarchal, heteronormative society on Chandrila, possibly homosexuality wasn't cool there, so she was willing to go where Mon Mothma would never go and become a true rebel. It will be hard and frustrating trying to undo decades of neoliberal propaganda, I know. But there are millions of people out there waiting for someone to explain to them why things are so bad and what they can do about it. And we have those answers, and the fascists simply do not. At least, none that I've heard. Alright. I heard you guys like dirty white boys with long hair who live in their own filth, so I thought I'd play the part, you know. So this brings me to a bit of a side tangent, so bear with me. I want to talk to any outright fascists who might have clicked on this video and that, for some reason, are still watching. Maybe you forgot to click away after calling me meth mouth in the comments or something. Who knows? Anything is possible, I guess. So if you're any kind of right-wing person out there, I have a question for you. What do you actually want? And I don't just mean in the short term, like forced deportation and prayer in schools or whatever the fuck. I mean, what does your ideal world look like? If you've won, and you get your way, and you've made the world in your image, what does that world look like? You see, if you were to ask me, I'd be able to tell you broadly the kind of world I want to create. One without hierarchy and coercive power. There'd still be power structures, because where there's people, there's power, but it would be bottom up, limited, and temporary. Decisions would be made by consent, with the aim of eliminating human suffering and maximizing human leisure. If you want to get specific, I'm for worker control of the world economy and horizontal control of the commons. In the short term, this looks like worker-owned businesses and taxes going to free college and healthcare and the like. And in the long term, it's more like workers' councils that steer the world economy and assemblies that make decisions for the collective good with all basic needs, food, water, shelter, etc., provided without any cost, monetary or otherwise. Now that may sound like a pipe dream to some, but at least I'm aiming for something. I've yet to hear a right-wing vision for the future other than some idealized return to a romanticized and fictional glorious past. I just don't think you've got one. The right seems to be seeking to trade the future for total power today. It's a race to rule over a wasteland. But what I'm saying to you is, the chances are that power is not making its way to you. Fascism is a death cult. It always needs an enemy. As I was saying before, it's a meat grinder that needs people to blame, exploit, and eliminate, and eventually, you're going to be on that menu. Let's look at the fascist characters in Andor as an example. We can start at the bottom with Cyril Karn. Oh wait, that's Ben Shapiro. Same difference. This slimy toad of a man-child is eager to find a boot to lick. He is a true believer in the cause and goes above and beyond for the Empire. Not until his final days, living as a spy amongst the Gorman, which I'll come back to, does he start to see the Empire's lies about the rebels. By then, it's far too late, and he dies a nobody, a statistical error, just like the dead cops that started the whole show. Even Andor doesn't know who the fuck he is, and Cyril spent his whole life trying to get revenge. Deidre Romero spent seemingly her whole life helping build the Empire, climbing the ranks of the ISB agency through intelligence gathering and torture, and for what? To land in a prison of her own making? Literally? Major Partagaz ends up dying from self-inflicted lead poisoning because he sees the writing on the wall. People will never stop rebelling, so the Empire will always need someone to blame for that rebellion. And he is next on the chopping block. Time and again, fascism is a beast that eats its own. Its continued existence is predicated on constant blood and death. Why would you want to be a part of that? Back to my original question though. Let's say none of this was true. Let's say, keeping in the Star Wars universe, the rebellion loses and is completely annihilated. What then? The Emperor gets his unlimited power. To do what exactly? Sit on a big chair and look creepy? To weep for there are no more worlds to conquer? Is that all power is? Some nihilistic ego project? Sounds boring as hell. What do you want? I'm pretty into existentialism, so I don't believe life has any inherent or supernatural meaning. That's bleak to some, but I see it as freeing. We create the meaning. So why not create something better? It seems so obvious to me that the right is such a dead end that it sometimes boggles my mind that anyone falls into it in the year 2025. But, and this may shock you, I blame the left. We also have a problem with our vision of the future in that we do not communicate it well at all. The problem seems to be that we are all mired in the discourse of the day, spending all our time trying to score political points in the present and paying no mind to what we might be building. It doesn't help that the left is very divided on how we build the better world we want, but that's a whole other video. Both sides are too busy in their tit-for-tat discourse that we never have time to imagine what we want from the world. This is the only reason I can see that allows centrists to exist at all. They see the chaos of a changing world and an uncertain future and cling to the status quo as the devil they know, so to speak. I think a lot of these views, from the center to the right, come from a place of fear. Fear of change, fear of the other. Fear, after all, as Master Yoda said, is the first step towards the dark side. You must conquer your fear using empathy. This system we are all drowning in is a place that has us fighting over scraps, has us convinced that it's a zero-sum game. If we even get a whiff of anyone else getting more, we assume it means we must be getting less. But that's a distraction from the people hoarding more than they could ever use. What I'm saying is, we are fighting over getting a slice of the pie while we are living in a bakery. This isn't meant to say that your fear isn't valid. It's a scary world out there. But I think you should use that fear of what could be and work to make a world without fear, instead of trying to become what people are scared of. Some people think there are others out there coming for them or their way of life. Some great horde crossing the border or shadowy cabal pulling the strings. If this is you, and you hate everything I talk about, at least try this. Travel. Travel somewhere that you assume is hostile to you. Take a day, go somewhere within your means, and just hang around. Don't try and start a fight, you will get your ass kicked. Just get lunch, walk around and people watch. You'll start to realize, if you're open to it, that difference is nothing to be scared of or to fight against. In fact, most folks all want basically the same things you do. To eat, stay comfy, have fun, get laid occasionally, and not suffer needlessly. Why not work to create a world that maximizes that? Anyway, I guess that's all I had to say to anyone on the other side of the political spectrum who, for some reason, is hate watching my Andor video. Leave a comment telling me your vision of the world. Or just leave death threats as usual, I don't care. We'll settle it in the streets. Now what was I talking about before all this? I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened. I'm old, I know. I remember getting into Spanish class and the teacher, shout out Mr. Markey, wheeling in a TV so we could all watch the news as the second plane hit. Ay caramba. By this point in my life, I was already reading, but not quite understanding, writers like Emma Goldman. No, I didn't have a lot of friends, how'd you guess? So I was already on the path to being a little revolutionary. A few years earlier, a little film had come out called The Phantom Menace, about the beginning of a manufactured conflict that brought about the end of democracy and the rise of fascism in a far-off galaxy. The parallels are a little eerie. After 9/11, the right swooped in to enact a plan decades in the making to push this country towards authoritarianism. Using a crisis this country created, they worked to centralize power in the executive branch and crush opposition. Even when Obama was president, they used their limited power and constant contrarianism to water down and halt any whiff of progress, and they succeeded. Not because they are particularly adept statesmen, but because liberals were playing by the rules that no longer applied. Like Obi-Wan, they were reliant on past political norms and didn't recognize that the environment had changed around them. They simply refused to accept that the neoliberal apparatus they had constructed could ever be manipulated. Even today, as masked feds snatch people off the streets and send them to foreign prisons, Dems seem more worried about poll numbers and rowdy protests. In America, and I assume most of the Western world, politics is treated like sports. There are two teams that are bitter rivals, each of them with their star players. They spend a lot of effort racking up points, in this case votes. Both these teams are fighting over the same prize, to rule. And just like sports, you can comment, cheer, jeer, and watch from the sidelines, but unless you're on the field, you can't affect the score. I'm not a sports guy, so I hope this analogy holds up. The problem becomes then that no one knows what they're fighting for, only what they're fighting against, the other team. Back in the good old days of the 90s, neoliberals kind of declared victory over the 20th century and declared their end of history. This is the best system we got, so we will never change, they told us. But another way to describe something that never changes is dead, and if something refuses to change, it might as well be called a suicide. As I said before, everything in life needs maintenance. What neoliberals did was say, what if we made maintenance the main feature? What if we can convince people that you can't actually change the system, only who maintains it? You can elect your HR rep, but you can't change how to run the business. As far as they are concerned, we were all on this ship, and there are no others, so it doesn't matter if it's sinking, they want to be captain. Now, if you've got half a brain, you may have noticed that history did not in fact end in the 90s. Boo! The system they said would last forever is unraveling from both internal contradictions and external pressures on all sides. The managers of this exploitation machine never conceived that someone would intentionally mismanage it. At a certain point in the last 30 years or so, the right stopped playing by the decency rules that neoliberals had constructed, and now the whole system is falling apart. The liberals, as they always do, set the stage, and the far right stole the spotlight. Some liberals out there might be thinking, what do you mean they set the stage? Surely my favorite Democrats have been fighting Republican power grabs this whole time. Let me ask you a question. Who became tough on crime and exploded the prison population with black men on trumped-up drug charges and led the fight against welfare cleans in the 90s? Clinton. Who carried out extrajudicial drone strikes across the globe and refused to close Gitmo? Obama. Who expanded the budget for ICE, kept kids in cages, and deported more people than Trump in his first term? You guessed it, Mr. Joseph Robinette Biden. The optics of the Democrats may be softer, but the nature of the capitalist machine remains the same. It needs constant war, an outgroup to persecute, and cheap prison labor. Capitalism doesn't care who's in charge. Different teams, same game. Let's bring it back to Star Wars. When the Old Republic strip mined Cassian's home, I'm sure it was all above board. I imagine it went along the lines of a vote in the Senate after a feasibility study was done to have a private-public partnership with the Trade Federation and mining guilds to harvest the much-needed minerals that would be a real boost to the galactic economy. Compare that to Gorman. When the Empire wanted the minerals buried under them, it lied to the media about an uprising and slaughtered the population before taking what they wanted. Same result, different ways of manufacturing consent. But let's say liberals were actually, in fact, interested in fighting the forces of fascism. We can even keep it in the Star Wars universe and say they are fighting the Empire, even though the Empire in Star Wars is based on the US. Fun fact. What kind of tactics would they have used, and what would they have us do as a movement? As I've already discussed, liberals are all about optics, so naturally, they love an empty gesture. Liberals are experts at watering down a radical message. As an example, let's take the call by Black Lives Matter protesters to abolish the police. This admittedly radical demand was quickly sanded down to defund the police, a much more reasonable demand that works within the framework of capital. We are paying for a service that we do not want, and we would like to cancel it. But even this was too much for Democrats. Instead, they donned kente cloth and took a knee at the Capitol and painted Black Lives Matter on a few streets across the country, just to turn around and run on calls to give cops more money. They had all the right words and symbols, but it was all done just to take the wind out of radical sails. This is one of capitalism's greatest strengths. It can take any resistance to it, break it down into a few phrases and symbols, strip it of its call to action, and sell it right back to you. It's able to do this because it has convinced you and everyone else that you are not a worker who creates value and makes the world run, but a consumer who expresses their values with what they buy and passively takes what the world gives them. Everything for liberals must work within this framework. For every problem, there is a solution that they can sell to you. Should we eradicate billionaires and their overpolluting private jets and companies or the military to solve climate change? No! Instead, you should buy an electric car and recycle more. A society with a collapsing safety net have you stressed and depressed? We got some pills just for you if you sign up with BetterHelp today. A bad diet causing your body to fall apart? Well, just eat better, stupid! Yeah, it's twice as expensive, twice as time consuming, and twice as inconvenient, but can you really put a price on health? That's health insurance companies' job, damn it! For liberals, there will always be a product or service that you can get to buy your way to freedom. But if there's a profit to be made off suffering, and society is run in the name of profit, then there will always be more suffering. Line must go up.
As you can see, it's been a profitable quarter this year for private prisons, AI data centers, and arms deals. You guys should be excited.
Why?
Well, because we made money. Look at all the graphs.
I see that, but we made it by locking innocent people up, poisoning the water, stealing people's jobs and creative works, and arming mass murderers. Why would I be excited about that?
Because, well, line go up.
When you link a person's morals to how they spend their money, suddenly you can convince them that the only way to fight the ills of capitalism is a different flavor of capitalism. You want to be a good person? Buy your coexist sticker from the local queer black-owned sweatshop. The boot of exploitation will still be on your neck, but it'll be much more stylish and worn by someone cool. Inasmuch as what you buy is what you are, what you choose not to buy is equally a mirror for your values. Instead of using your voice as your voice, liberals would have you use your money as your voice. Vote with your dollar, as they say. There are several problems with that, not least of which it implies that the more dollars you have, the more of a voice you have, and we have seen how that pans out in the world of lobbying. Also, this convinces people that their only avenue for protest is a boycott. Unfortunately, that's just no longer enough. The problem is, we no longer live in the world of the 60s, where a large, organized boycott can do significant damage to a business. We are unlucky enough to live in the hyper-monopolized, uber-capitalist world of the 21st century. There are just some companies you cannot avoid, and boy, I've tried. Walmart and Amazon have eaten away almost all competitors, so much so that in-person brick-and-mortar stores are almost a thing of the past, and they are just the most obvious examples. On the shelves of these stores, you're overwhelmed with the illusion of choice, when in reality, all these options are owned by a handful of companies who all use one or two sources for the actual substance of what you're buying. None of it is ethical, and none of it is local. Capitalism has simply spread itself too deep into our lives and become too complex to simply not participate in it. Sorry, van life.
Well, I can't buy that. They fund genocide. Ugh, and they have a racist owner. These guys tweeted Nazi shit last week. Fuck it. I'm just gonna go live in the woods. I don't need anyone else. I'm just gonna drive in a car I didn't build, on roads I didn't lay, and grow my own food in a house I'll build. I miss indoor plumbing.
This isn't to say that boycotts aren't completely useless. It just can't be done in isolation. Look at the BDS movement for Palestine. It's a boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It's hitting the Israeli economy angle on 3 separate fronts, in addition to other methods of fighting against the genocidal ethno-state. Liberals would have you believe that you could just buy the product with the best politics, and that will change the world. But unless you decide to stop eating and go live off-grid, someone somewhere is being exploited, because that is the nature of the system. Another way neoliberalism convinces you that you have power while simultaneously taking your power away is with our representative government as a whole. It sounds like a crazy thing to say, but politicians use that ever-turning election cycle to keep you from doing anything yourself. To go way back to our sports metaphor, we lost this game, but we'll get them next time. Let's think about what voting actually is, though. Where does a politician get their power? From some supernatural being? A magic sword? Their gene pool? No. In modern times, at least, they govern from the consent of the governed. When we vote, we are individually handing over our collective power to people we don't know who have, let's say, compromised motivations and do not give a single shit about our lives. You go in and from a pool of narrow options, pull the lever of the person you think most aligns with your personal politics. Or, more accurately, the person who least offends your personal politics out of the bad batch of options. If instead all the people who begrudgingly vote Democrat got together and organized to get done what they are waiting for Democrats to do, it would just get done. The power has been there all along, and we've just been handing it away. The dirty little secret is, we don't need them. Think of all the time, money, and energy spent on the next campaign, midterm, or presidential election that could instead be used for mutual aid, or local projects, or community defense and labor organizing. It's just a waste. But just like boycotting, I'm not saying that you shouldn't vote. That's up to you. What I am saying is to be suspicious of any answer to oppression that is given to you by your oppressor. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, and on and on. In Andor, they did the most to dismantle the Empire when they were destroying infrastructure, disrupting arrests and investigations, and stealing critical plans. Not when they were refusing to buy Empire-made groceries or calling Palpatine Emperor Diaperface on space Twitter or whatever. It was direct action that made the gains before liberals like Mon Mothma reined them in. The real reason liberals would never be able to defeat the Empire is, of course, because they are the Empire. They have the same moneyed interest in expanding the American empire as conservatives, the only difference being their justifications. Instead of an American first might makes right message, they go for the obfuscated beacons of democracy, protecting American interest angle. Democrats don't want to bomb a bunch of poor countries, but we have to protect our interest in the region. That region being the entirety of Earth if the number of military bases is any indication. But people here and elsewhere have finally started to see through that, and have realized that both sides are bad options. It doesn't matter how you frame your message if the message sucks. So people have started to look outside their two shitty options for something, anything different. This, of course, scares the powerful more than any threat from the political right. If the people you govern stop believing in the story that puts you in power, things will start to crumble pretty fast. It's not long after you realize the emperor has no clothes that you realize you don't really need an emperor at all. So they have started to overreact and erode the values when they once swore that they were the only ones who would be able to protect them. This is most apparent in the clampdown on pro-Palestinian protests. The uniparty line for 60 years on Israel has been that we support them so Jews have a safe place in the world, that they are our closest ally in the Middle East, and the only true democracy in the region. On top of that, it's the Holy Land, promised to them by God a few thousand years ago. All this seemed to work despite how transparent it is until the last few years when Israel started unleashing a full genocide on the people of Gaza. When a new narrative started streaming to us over our little black pocket screens directly from the source without the spin of the American media, people started to question that story. Why can't we just make the whole world safe for Jews? Why do they need a special ethno-state? And if it's a democracy, why can't Palestinian people vote? And who the fuck cares about their imaginary friend? We live in the real world after all. It's not long before you realize that maybe that story you were fed was bullshit. And aside from some religious nuts who think if enough Jews move to Israel, their sky daddy will come down and spank the rest of us, America supports Israel because it is an extension of the American empire. A loaded gun pointed at the oil-producing countries in the region. A rabid attack dog we keep threatening to let off the leash if countries don't play ball with American interest. Maybe we're the baddies. That kind of erosion of trust in the institutions of power is what has caused this backlash to groups critical of Israel. From America to the UK and even Germany, all three countries responsible in their own ways for the whole situation in the first place, have started to suppress anyone critical of Israel in any way, stripping people of one of their pillars of the so-called free world's basic rights, free speech. They first went with the same old bag of tricks and tried to spin the story about Israel's right to defend itself and labeling any resistance as terrorism or anti-Semitism. But as soon as it became clear that that wasn't working, because there's nothing that could really justify systematically killing women and children, bombing hospitals and kindergartens, etc., they immediately went to work cutting off the very avenues of protest they once championed. States have signed into law anti-BDS legislation that puts bans on coordinated boycotts of Israel. They spent millions running against candidates in their own party if they dared to speak out against genocide. It's also illegal to support any organization that might in some way have something to do with any group they deem to be a terrorist organization. So much for voting with your dollar, I guess. So keep in mind, in the galaxy far, far away, the whole of the resistance is deemed by the Empire to be a terrorist organization, which justifies their use of lethal force. Are you starting to get a sense of what side of that divide these Western governments might be on? Liberals seek only to water down the message until it's empty. They want to take the demand for a ceasefire now, a demand already watered down from the anti-Zionist call to end Israel's apartheid state, which is further watered down from the anarchist call for the eradication of borders and the free movement of people and ideas, not just capital, but I digress, to a brokering of a return to an uneven two-state solution, and maybe we won't sell them as many weapons anymore, for a while. We have to compromise with the other side, after all, if we want to get anything done. The problem, of course, is that the other side is a bunch of genocidal lunatics who will never be satisfied. Besides the fact that it's morally repugnant and cowardly, it also just won't work. It's like if the Rebel Alliance decided, okay Palpatine, as long as you put up a nice plaque for Alderaan and let Tatooine govern itself, we will let you have a mini Death Star that can only blow up small moons, as long as you pinky promise not to use it. Liberals want you to use their preferred methods of protest exactly because they know that if they can't ignore it or leech the energy out of the movement and divert it into meaningless market solutions, then they could just outright shut it down. Why would they ever give you the tools that you need to take away their power? The people that line their pockets make way too much money to let something as meaningless as public opinion to get in the way of their hold on power. And if you gotta fund a little genocide to do it, so be it. Now, I don't mean to leave you here feeling powerless. I'm not saying these tactics don't have their place, but they must be backed up by more militant, direct action organizing. Otherwise, any smooth-talking liberal can come along, peddling hope and change, just to suck the energy out of the revolution and back into the hands of the system that is causing the problem in the first place. Mon Mothma's money may be useful, and she may know how to throw a rager, but it doesn't mean she knows how to lead a revolution.
I'm gonna beat you, Palpatine. I will restore the Republic.
Silly child, I was voted into power by the Senate itself.
Oh, in that case, I'm gonna bring back the Senate. and we're going to take you down. We're going to open a commission to the effects of your policy and vote to impeach.
What?
Then we will have a committee to decide on how big of a fine you'll pay for Alderaan.
Okay.
I'm going to sentence you to a life of a best-selling tell-all author, rotating between the Sunday news shows and Toxic Manosphere podcast until you land a consulting lobbyist job.
Ugh, you're pathetic. Vader, get him.
Gladly.
I have gotten way off the topic of Andor here, and I do apologize. But liberals just fucking annoy me, here or in fiction, so I had a lot to get off my chest. Whenever a conservative hurtles the liberal or commie accusation my way, I have to tell them not to insult me. I'm much worse than that. I'm an anarchist, baby. To get back to the point and wrap this thing up, Andor is a fantastic show that we can glean lessons from about how to fight fascism, the cost of fighting, and ultimately, the dangers of liberalism in revolutionary times. The acting is incredible. The sets and costumes were immaculate. Writing was flawless. It is a show firing on all cylinders. It may in fact be the best Star Wars thing to have ever Star Warsed. And they did it all without a single lightsaber and merely a mention of the Force. It's a foot soldier's view of a galaxy of myths and legends. How it got made under the Mickey-sized boot of Disney is a true mystery. In the end, though, it is still just a show made by a giant corporation to satisfy shareholders and make a profit. In and of itself, it is not revolutionary. Honestly, it fits more in line with the neoliberal trick of giving you a product or service that saps you of your own revolutionary potential. If you watch this show and you think to yourself, well, I liked it, so I must be one of the good guys, you're falling for it. This show is only helpful if it inspires you to get out there and start organizing against the fascism that's here, in this galaxy, today. As I finish writing and recording this, the American government is building camps to hold undocumented folks and potentially sell them off as free labor. They are legislating justifications for their oppression of the marginalized, like non-white folks and trans folks. They are dismantling what little of a social safety net we have left to transfer billions to the rich and powerful. They are currently disappearing people off the street in broad daylight and sending them places where we cannot hear them dissent. The Empire is here. The Sith have taken over, and the stormtroopers are in the streets. Your streets. And much like Cassian Andor in the beginning of the show, the walls are closing in. The problem has become impossible to ignore. So what are you going to do about it? There are really only three things you need to decide right now. First, and most importantly, which side are you on? If you're chomping at the bit to be a stormtrooper, well, I don't know how you made it this far in the video. Fuck off. Second, once you decided what side you're on, what are you going to do about it? Will you be a liberal, hoping to give the old ways one more shot? If only we did it right this time, surely it will work. We just need a more diverse capitalism. The boot isn't so bad if someone else is wearing it. If so, you're probably waiting for someone to come save us. Luke Skywalker or Bernie Sanders or an AOC or Mon Mothma to swoop in and reestablish the glory days of the old republic. But there are no solutions in the old systems that set the stage for fascism's rise. Andor shows us a new world doesn't come from big, mythical figures, but in all of us coming together in solidarity, fighting, and sacrificing for the world we want. Taking back the power that has been there all along that we have traded away in voting booths. Kylo Ren was wrong about most things, but he was right about letting the past go, advice he obviously never took as he tried to recreate the Empire. You learn from it and you make something new. Counterintuitively, to be a liberal is to be conservative. It's all calls to be patient, because change will happen slowly. A desperate clinging to institutions that no longer serve the people. Liberalism sits revolution out, chastising from the sidelines until it's time to take credit for the change. This is ultimately picking a side. You're just not on the side you think you're on. Will you be an opportunist? Just making sure in all the chaos that the next decades bring, you get yours by any means. Maybe you'll be an accelerationist, or a bystander. Or will you be a rebel who spends all their waking hours fighting against oppression for a better world? You then have to consider just how far you'll go and how much you're willing to risk for the cause. Would the cause even benefit from you burning away your life like Luthen did, or is it better served with you in a support role? One thing we can learn from Andor is that it will take all types to fight fascism, from the libbiest of libs to the most violent of revolutionaries. Once the fight is over, you must look at those who see victory as returning to the past that created the conditions for its own downfall as a threat to a better world. Lastly, and most overlooked, what kind of world do you want to build? Do you really want to fight and possibly die to reinstate the very systems that led us down the path we are on now? Or do you want to think bigger, bolder, and build a society without coercion and oppression? Because I know if I'm going to go down, I want it to be worth it. In a world where the center cannot hold, why would you want to be a centrist? Things are changing, one way or the other. So pick a side or get out of the way. And as always, death to the Empire, death to fascism, and death to the algorithm.
Death to the algorithm.